All right. So we're a little bit late. This one's on me, not you guys this time. That'd be a first. There was a hiccup in my internet and I had to reboot my router. So we are here. We're just here a little bit late. So without any ado and hopefully being on par where I'm supposed to be, I'm going to do the correct opening now. I apologize. I wasn't sure if this was actually going to work tonight. That was rude.
Tried to break what I couldn't see. Now I see what it made of me. His laughs cuts clean through doubt, throws the truth every time it's loud. Fire beside me, lighting the dark. She holds the night while I find the spark. They couldn't undo what I've become. I couldn't turn.
Ooh, yeah, I hit the wrong button. I apologize. We're feeling a little off tonight because that was weird, but we're here. Hello, and welcome those of you who are new to this channel. This is Bim's story time on my channel, Hekkles. I'm your host, Bim, and I welcome you, and so does my tent and my story, or any story that I'm reading. I tell several stories, but right now we are mainly focused on one called The Tale of Little Light. And I will be continuing to tell that story where we picked off from last week. Now, I'm just going to say my station is not always for children. At some point, things might get a little rough or, God forbid, slightly adult-like. So I'm just going to let you know now, adult themes may be included at some point. Horror is definitely included from earlier chapters. Gore, blood, descriptions, ideas, things, places that might be a little weird for children to get into. And I'm not talking like, oh, the weird nonsense of the day, like, and violence, thinking about how something goes down or how someone could die from a really wicked impact, that kind of stuff. Anyways, I digress. Welcome to my station, and we're going to pick back up on chapter 8, The Ten of Humility. Give me one moment to make sure I don't deafen you, and we will have some background sound and pick right back up. Yeah. I'm hoping that is being picked up. I believe it is, but it's super faint, so we're going to get a little bit more. Enough to get me to speak up. Something like that. Okay. So, my images are way off. Everything apparently is way off, but I apologize. The question of the week: when does humility stop being a lesson? And when does it become humiliation? Let me know down in the comments. I'm sorry everything's a little off because I thought something totally different was happening and I'm late, so I apologize. And I didn't have my stuff right. Shame on me. Haha. Anyways, chapter 8. The Ten of Humility. A small grin touched Annalise's mouth. He's a bit creepy. Fix my text. What happened here? Oh, well, you're not ready, are you? Finn looked up at her from beneath the brim of his slipping hat. This still isn't right. What's happening? No. Yes. Annalise laughed softly at his expression. Funny, she added quickly. Just, strange. She gestured vaguely as they walked. Her tail flicked once behind her. The way he talks is so precise, like he knows every word before he says it. She paused. But his tone, Annalise tilted her head, searching for the right shape of the thought. Makes him sound like he's part machine? Bim's eyes widened. He isn't, she said, shaking her head. A soft laugh escaped her. He's just really gets into it. So yeah, was it? There you go. Explore. Her gaze shifted towards the tent head, where warmer colors gathered beneath the darkening carnival sky. Amber and gold glowed through the canvas seams and lantern glass, bright and restless, like laughter trying to escape. If there's anyone here who truly loves what they do, she said, then gave a small certain nod, it's him. The way she said it took some of the edge off of the warning, but not all of it, just enough to turn the dread into curiosity. Bim moved a little closer to her side. The path changed beneath their feet as they approached. Packed earth gave way to pale wooden boards, and then to something softer, something springy enough that each footstep started to seem like a bounce. Every few steps, one of Bim's shoes squeaked. He tried walking a little more carefully, and then, every few steps, squeak. He tried putting his weight on the outside of his shoe. Every few steps, squeak. He tried taking one enormous, dignified stride. Instantly, loud squeak. Annalise pressed her lips together. Bim glanced up at her. Shh! I didn't say anything. Your face did, he said, her tail curled behind her as she fought for a smile. Ahead, the canvas parted around a wide entrance glowing with warm amber light. Above it, stitched in threads that shimmered whenever Bim looked away, were the words, "The Tent of Humility." The letters seemed perfectly polite. That made them suspicious. Bim stopped. Annalise stopped with him. From somewhere inside, laughter rolled through the tent. Not ordinary laughter. It moved like something alive, waiting, resting, ready to spring. Annalise crouched beside him, her yellow eyes warm beneath the lantern glow. Here's the trick, she said softly. Don't try to prove you're smart. Bim blinked. But what if they think I'm dumb? Then let them. He stared at her, horrified. Annalise's expression softened. I know it sounds awful. It does. But sometimes people learn more from what you don't defend than from what you do. Bim looked towards the entrance again. Warm light spilled across the floorboards and washed over the toes of his shoes. One of them gave a tiny squeak. Annalise heard it. Her mouth twitched. Bim sighed. My shoes betray me. I probably could have said that a little more like a kid. They're keeping you humble. That's not funny. It's literally the tent. Bim looked at her. Annalise grinned and offered him her hand. Come on, little light. He hesitated. Then he took it. Together they stepped into the laughter. The striped curtains brushed across Bim's shoulders as he crossed the threshold, then whispered shut instantly behind them. For one breath, Amber light swallowed everything. The carnival outside disappeared. The pathways, the moonlit tents, the distant music, all of it became muffled beneath the canvas, leaving only Annalise's warm hand around his and the soft trader's squeak of Bim's shoes. Then, the tent of humility opened around them. Laughter struck him at once. Immediate. Oh. It wrapped around the room in warm rolling waves, bouncing from the canvas walls and circling back from every corner. It was not the bright applause of a performance already underway. It was not mockery. It was something stranger, something measured, as though the room itself had been turned into humor, and every sound made inside it knew how to return smiling. The floor dipped beneath Bim's first step. His shoes squeaked. The laughter swelled. Bim stopped. The laughter stopped with him. He slowly lifted one foot. Somewhere to his left, the wooden hinge creaked in the exact same pitch as his shoe. A second hinge answered from the right, and a third sound came from above. Squeak! Bim lowered his foot. The room erupted again. Analise covered her mouth. You said the shoe was keeping me humble, Bim muttered. You're doing excellent work. He gave her a wounded look. The tent opened around them, and tiers of pale wooded platforms, curved branches, narrow stairways, and a small stage arranged in odd angles. Nothing appeared completely level. Floors leaned where walls ought to have been standing. Curtains hung upside down. Painted doors waited halfway up the canvas, with no staircase leading to them. Orange and gold lanterns floated overhead, without chains. Each wore the same pleasant smile. Bim avoided looking at them. At the center of the tent stood a single white chair beneath a cone of amber light, empty, waiting. A small round table sat beside it, holding a glass of water, 3 white gloves, a silver bell, and a peeled banana. Bim pointed. Why is there a banana? Annalise studied the table. Preparation. For what? No one knows. The silver bell rang. Bim jumped. No one had touched it. The white gloves rose from the tabletop. One applauded. The second wagged her finger at the first. The third pointed towards the empty chair. Bim stared. A man was sitting there now. Bim was certain the chair had been empty. Almost certain. The man wore a fitted coat of patches, cut with such careful precision that even the seams appeared disciplined. A narrow orange waistcoat streamed beneath it. His trousers were striped. His polished shoes were perfectly still, and his white gloves rested neatly upon the head of a slender cane. His face was painted in delicate lines of black and ivory. Not enough to hide them, just enough to make every expression seem intentional. He smiled, and let her smile with him. Welcome, he said. His voice was smooth and exact, each syllable placed as carefully as a knife beside a dinner plate. Bim understood immediately what Annalise had bet. The man did not sound like a machine. Machines sounded less prepared. His eyes settled on Bim, then on Bim's hat, then on his shoes, and then on his shoes as one squeaked. The man smiled deepened by the smallest possible amount. Ah, he said, you have brought your own introduction. Then, the spotlight snapped on. Not on Annalise, but on Bim. The sudden white gold beam struck him full in the face. He flinched and threw one arm up. his oversized hat slipping forward yet again and swallowing half of his face. The room laughed, not cruelly but instantly, as though the moment had been waiting for him. Bim froze beneath the light, one sleeve drooping over his hand, his hat crooked up, and his cloak far too dramatic for his tiny shoulders. His heart leapt high into his chest. Analise stepped closer. "Easy," she murmured. "It's part of the room." "That doesn't make it better," Bim whispered. "No," she said softly, "but it makes it less personal." The light dimmed enough for him to see. The tent of humility was smaller than the master tent, yet somehow more crowded with attention. Warm orange, gold, and silver canvas curved overhead in layers and folds. Lanterns hung in uneven rows, each painted with a different smiling face. Some grinned, some smirked. Some looked as though they knew a joke and had no intention explaining. The laughter faded into a low ripple. The voice rose from the center of the ring. "Ah, yes." Smooth, theatrical, measured down to the breath. "The little master." Oh no, there goes my ear again. Look, I'm dying. Fine, we'll keep it off. I can only see one side anyways. Yes. Smooth, theatrical, measured down to the breath. "The little master has come to learn a little." Humility. The room laughed again. Not viciously, but not gentle either. It was the kind of laughter that opened a place for you while testing whether you could bear to stand inside it. The kind that asked if you could become part of the joke without breaking beneath it. Bim tightened his grip on the brim of his hat. The spotlight shifted. The white chair beneath it was empty. The single tap of a cane sounded from the center ring. Bim turned. Bernzebark stood there now, tall, thin, and impossibly still. He stood at the center of the tent. He wore a sharply tailored coat of warm white gold, layer over fabrics that caught the light sunlit silk. The cut was so exact it looked less sewn and more engineered. His pale gloves rested neatly at his side. His polished boots did not move. His dark hair swept back in a single strand out of place. At first glance, his posture seemed loose, almost casual, but nothing about him was careless. Every angle appeared chosen. Every breath seemed rehearsed. Even the small smile arranged on his face looked measured to a fraction. His eyes were bright amber, almost golden, and they settled on Bim with calm, unerring interest. "Welcome, little light," he said. Bim did not know why the name unsettled him more than Little Master. Perhaps because Bernzebark spoke as though he already knew exactly how brightly Bim burned. And precisely how little darkness it could take to snuff him out. The man tilted his head by the smallest possible degree. "I am Bernzebark. And before you ask, no, I am not a wolf." Bim's mouth opened, then closed. Beside him, Analise turned her face anyways. Her shoulders shook. Bernzebark's smile sharpened by one careful degree. "Excellent, excellent," he said. "We have saved time." The tent chuckled with him. Heat crept into Bim's cheeks. His shoes squeaked. The laughter swelled. Bernzebark's amber gaze dropped towards the shoes, then rose again. "Even better," he said. "You've arrived with your own accomplice." Thunderbark's amber eyes remained fixed on Bim. They were not sharp like bonds, not strange and spiraling like Threnzables. They were focused, calculating. The eyes of a man who had already noticed 12 things and had politely decided to mention only 3. Silence settled over the tent. Warm silence. Expected silence. Thunderbark allowed it to linger until Bim could feel every crooked inch of his hat. The amber gaze moved from the squeaking shoe to the slipping brim. As for your other accomplice, it appears to be winning. The room laughed immediately. Bim froze. Slowly, with what dignity he could gather, he reached up and pushed it back into place. Again, the laughter grew louder. Not because he looked ridiculous, because he looked so terribly serious about not looking so ridiculous. Thunderbark gave one small approving nod. Excellent. Commitment. To the bit. The tent erupted. Bim turned towards Analise. Analise looked away. Immediately, absolutely immediately, her shoulders shook. Traitor, Bim mumbled. Absolute traitor, he thought. Bim stared at her. You said this was a nice tent. Annalise covered her mouth. It is. You lie. No, it's affection. It doesn't feel like it. Thunderbark raised one gloved hand. The laughter ceased at once. He did not command it. The room simply followed him. And Bim noticed that. Thunderbark stepped forward. 1 measure step. Not an inch further than necessary. Little master, a question, he asked. Silence returned. Bim stared at him. Thunderbark stared back. The pause stretched. Silence stretched. Long enough for Bim to wonder whether the question itself was just a trick. Then Thunderbark spoke. If a hat continues falling, he paused. The smile widened by one careful, permitted degree. At what point? The pause stretched longer. Does it become the floor? Silence. Absolute silence. Bim blinked once, twice. Then he looked at Annalise. Annalise looked horrified. Not for him, for herself. Because she knew exactly what was happening. Bim slowly turned back to Thunderbark. What? The tent erupted. Laughter rolled around him. I just smacked my stuff. Laughter rolled around him in warm, delighted waves. Not cruel, not sharp, simply pleased. Thunderbark nodded once. Correct. The laughter stopped. Bim stared at him. What? Thunderbark pointed one gloved finger directly at him. Excellent instinct. You recognized nonsense. Another pause. Most people actually fail. Bim looked deeply concerned. Very deeply concerned. Then, quietly, I miss Bond, he muttered. The room laughed again. As they heard it, even Annalise lost the battle with her smile, and somewhere beneath the embarrassment, beneath the confusion, beneath the spotlight, the impossible tent, and the stranger who spoke as though every breath had been rehearsed, Bim felt something shift. Not understanding, certainly not safety, but something smaller. The strange realization that here, confusion might not mean he was losing. It might mean he was playing along correctly. The laughter softened, not gone, almost as if it was waiting. Bim squinted up at Thunderbark from beneath the slipping brim, one hand still holding his hat in place. The other arm hung awkwardly at his side, as though it had forgotten what dignity required of it. Beside him, Analise remained calm. That should have helped. Instead, it made everything feel deliberate. The room had noticed him. Now its master had. And beneath the amber light and Brinzelbark's carefully crafted smile, Bim had the sudden feeling that being seen here might be every bit as dangerous as being hunted. Something keen moved behind Brinzelbark's eyes. The witch's law has asked me to... He turned one hand gracefully in the air, selecting the phrase, break you in. Bim's fingers tightened around his hat. Brinzelbark spread his arms. Gold and white fabric caught the light. Every fold... I say white. Should be black. I apologize. I have a typo. Good job. Anyways, every fold falling into place as though even his sleeves had practiced. And what better instrument than humility? A ripple of laughter passed through the tent. Brinzelbark tilted his head, studying Bim with the pleasant curiosity of someone examining a locked box he fully intended to open. You think you are small. A soft chuckle escaped him. By the time we're finished, I shall make you feel like a teacup beside a cask of ale. The room laughed again. Warm, easy, sharp enough that the edges stung less. Heat climbed into Bim's cheek. He glanced down at himself, then back up. I already feel like a teacup. Brinzelbark's smile brightened. Excellent. A pause. That's for me, because... Then, we may begin with the handle. Bim did not know what a cask of ale was, but he understood enough. Small, smaller, smallest. Analise down and whispered from the corner of her mouth. Don't worry, he does this to everyone, Bim whispered back. Doesn't help. No. Then why did you say it? I panicked. Brinzelbark's smile sharpened. But first, the spotlight narrowed. Only a little, yet Bim felt it close around him like a hand made of light. We must establish whether you can lap at yourself. Silence settled over the tent. Soft. Expected. Bim swallowed. His hat slipped. He pushed it back up. Brinzelbark followed the motion with terrible delight. Promising start. Then he turned sharply, one gloved hand slicing towards the darkness beyond the ring. I call forth. His coat flared behind him. Hekkles. Silence. Absolute silence, not empty silence, anticipating silence. Then a voice drifted from the dark. Do not introduce me like that, Sir Barks-a-lot. Snickers broke out from across the room. Brinzelbark did not miss a beat. If anything, the interruption pleased him. The laughter softened, but never vanished. Lingering in the tent like a grin no one had bothered to put away. Something shifted at the edge of the spotlight. There was no grand entrance. No flourish, no burst of music or smoke, just a figure stepping into view. Somehow, that made a stranger. He did not enter the room so much as reveal he had been standing there all along, just beyond the audience, content to let discomfort announce it first. Hekkles stepped in to the white gold light with the exhausted confidence of someone who had been summoned against his will and intended to make that everyone else's problem. He was lean and angular, dressed in dark mismatched layers that looked half formal and half stolen from the laundry of someone more important. A long scarf hung around his neck despite the heat of the tent, and one trailing nearly to the floor. His hair stuck up in several directions as if too many thoughts had attempted to escape all at once. His smile was crooked. His eyes were worse. Bright, clever, awake. They swept over Bim once, and Bim had an uncomfortable feeling that Hekkles had already noticed the hat, the shoes, the cloak, the fear beneath the cloak, and the exact rhythm of his breathing. Hekkles looked at Threnzabark first, then at Analise, then at Bim. He paused. A long pause. Bim braced himself. Hekkles lifted one hand and pointed gently. "That," he said, "is a very small landlord." The tent broke. Laughter burst outward in one warm sonic wave. Bim looked down. Annalise covered her mouth. Hekkles studied him for another moment, then added, almost kindly, "Terrible property value, though." The laughter doubled. Threnzabark smiled like a knife being polished. Bim pushed his hat up with both hands again. I don't own land." Hekkles coughed slightly and squinted at him with a grave seriousness. "Not yet. But you have the hat of a man who intends to tax the birds." The tent laughed again. Precious. Bim looked at Annalise. She was absolutely no help. Her shoulders were shaking. Then Zabark folded his hands neatly at his back. "Hekkles," he said smoothly, "this is Bim, little master. New heir, future pillar. Tiny formal catastrophe." Hekkles nodded slowly. Yes, I caught most of that from the silhouette." Bim frowned. "My silhouette? The hat arrived 3 seconds before you did." Another wave of laughter swept through the tent. This time, he climbed all the way to Bim's ears. But there was something different about Hekkles' voice. It was sharp. Very sharp, yet it did not feel cruel. It poked without stabbing, teased without taking anything from him. Hekkles tilted his head. "You nervous, little landlord?" Bim hesitated, then nodded once. Hekkles nodded back, as though Bim answered correctly. "Good. Means you're paying attention." Threnzabark's smile widened. "A fine beginning." Bim looked between them. "Is everyone here going to confuse me?" Hekkles and Threnzabark answered at the same time. "Yes!" Annalise sighed. "They mean it lovingly." Hekkles glanced at her. "I meant it professionally." Threnzabark inclined his head. "As did I." Bim's hat slid down over both eyes. The tent waited. He sighed, pushed it back into place, and muttered, "I missed breakfast." For half a second, there was silence. Then Hekkles grinned. "Oh," he said. "He'll do." Bim stood straighter without meaning to, one hand still gripping the brim of his troublesome hat. Now that Hekkles was closer, Bim could see him properly. He carried himself as though balance were less law and more a suggestion he had declined. One shoulder sat lower than the other, his posture tilted faintly off center, yet nothing about him seemed in any danger of ever falling. The patchwork bowler rested crooked on his head, stitched from fabrics that should have fought one another and somehow still got along. Deep colors, faded colors, loud patterns broken by tired seams. Beneath it, cyan curls escaped in uneven waves, flashing almost electric whenever they caught the gold white light. His face was painted in black and white, not evenly, nor neatly. One eye was ring darker than the other. Spirals scattered, dots wandered across his skin, like thoughts that had refused to sit still long enough to be arranged. His smile stretched a little too wide, not enough to become monstrous, enough to suggest he knew how. Hekkles watched Bim study him, then raised one eyebrow. Careful! Bim stiffened. Why? You're looking at me like I make sense. The tent chuckled. Hekkles leaned closer, lowering his voice as though sharing something important. That can become a very dangerous habit. But the smile was not painted on. It was not forced. It belonged to him. That was the unsettling part. Hekkles' bright green eyes settled on Bim. The tent went quiet. Not theatrical quiet. The kind of quiet when there's an inspection. The kind that came when someone opened a strange little box and began deciding which side of it might bite. Then Hekkles crouched, slowly, carefully. His limbs folded at angles, then almost looked impressive. One elbow committed to rest against his knee as his head tipped to one side. The crooked smile never moved. His eyes narrow. Bim blinked. Hekkles blinked back. Benzabark folded his arms behind his back and waited for the patience of a man who knew something was about to go wrong beautifully. Analise looked concerned. Not for Bim, for the room. Hekkles leaned closer. You're smaller than I expected. Bim looked down at himself, then up again. Thank you? Hekkles became absolutely still. He looked at Benzabark, then Analise, then back at Bim. Did he just accept being tiny as a compliment? The room burst out loud. Laughter rolled outward in warm, helpless waves. Bim looked around, alarmed. What just happened? Analise covered her face, her shoulders shaking. Benzabark turned away. Not out of politeness, out of sheer survival. Hekkles continued staring at Bim, actually staring. Then his bright green eyes widened. Oh no! Bim blinked. What? Hekkles slowly lifted one finger and pointed at him as though identifying a species no sensible scholar had ever believed existed. He's sincere! Silence fell. A different silence this time. Hekkles looked almost offended by this discovery. Bim glanced towards Analise. Is that bad? She lowered one hand just enough to answer. Not usually. Usually? Hekkles rose without taking his eyes off Bim. This is going to be much harder than I thought. Bim's hand tightened around the brim of his hat. For me? Hekkles' smile stretched wider. No. He turned towards Benzabark. For us. Absolute silence. Then Hekkles turned towards the audience. Look! He's weaponized adorable! The tent then detonated. People doubled over laughing. One lantern overheard, and someone actually snorted. Bim froze. Very slowly, very, very slowly, He looked at Analise. What's happening? Analise looked at him, at the tiny form of clothes, at the oversized hat, at the utterly genuine concern on his face. Then she looked away. She failed instantly. Nope, Analise. Nope, Analise. Her shoulders started to shake. Absolutely not, kid. Bim turned back to Hekkles. Am I in trouble? The laughter softened. It did not disappear. It simply changed. Hekkles looked at him. Really looked at him. His bright green eyes held Bim's without blinking, and for a moment it felt less like being watched than carefully examined. Then Hekkles' smiles changed. Only a little. So slightly most people may not have noticed. Less performance and more person. No, he said quietly. No, little landlord. I think you're a little endangered of being liked here. And somehow, that felt even scarier to Bim. Bim tightened the grip on his hat. Hekkles tilted his head, slowly, curiously. Oh? He murmured almost to himself. They weren't exaggerating. He stepped closer. His boots made almost no sound against the floor, but the bells and trinkets stitched into his coat gave a faint, uneven jingle with every movement, as though one of them had agreed upon a rhythm and had stopped trying. The sound was small, and the hush of the tent it carried. Hekkles circled Bim once. Not dramatically, not quickly, he simply observed. The slipping hat, the solemn little face beneath it, the hands trying not to shake. The brave, stubborn effort it took Bim to remain beneath the spotlight while an entire room watched him. When Hekkles came to a stop, the humor had not left his expression, but something gentler stood behind it now. You're frightened, he said. Bim swallowed. Yes? You're embarrassed. Yes? You have no idea what everyone expects from you. Bim hesitated, then nodded. Oop. Hekkles glanced towards Lindsbart, then Analise, then the waiting audience. And yet, he said, turning back to Bim, you're still standing here. Bim looked down at his shoes. One squeak. The room gave a soft, affectionate chuckle. Hekkles' crooked smile returned. There, he said, even your footwear agrees. Bim looked up. With what? That courage rarely looks dignified when it's happening like this. The more casually Hekkles moved around him, the more exposed Bim felt, as though stillness was ready to bite, as though every quiet step peeled something away from him. Hekkles studied him. From the corner of one bright green eye, you're smaller than the idea of you, he murmured. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Bim frowned. He looked down at himself, then back up. There was an idea of me? Hekkles stopped. Slowly he turned. The tent went still, absolutely still. Hekkles looked at Finzelbart. Finzelbart looked back, and Elise closed her eyes. Not again. Not already. Hekkles lifted one dramatic finger. Sir, barks a lot. Do you hear this, child? Finzelbart folded his hands neatly behind the back of his head. I do. Hekkles turned towards Bim. His eyes widened with great concern. Little landlord! He crouched until they were nearly eye to eye. Very close. Very serious. There are rumors. Bim froze. About me? Whispers. The audience held itself together with visible effort. Bim's alarm deepened. What kind of legends? Hekkles looked towards the middle distance, thinking, carefully selecting from what appeared to be a vast and troubling archive. Then he said, some claim your hat once entered the room before you existed. The tent exploded. People folded sideways with laughter. Analise turned completely around. Gone. Absolutely gone. Bim stared at Hekkles. One slow blink. Then another. That doesn't even make sense, Bim said. Hekkles shot upright and pointed at him. Look, he's learning. Laughter in the tent doubled down. Bart gave one slow approving nod. Excellent progress. Bim looked around the room, at the laughing strangers, at Analise losing an entire war against composure, at Hekkles celebrating nonsense as though Bim had solved some ancient riddle, at Bart standing there as if all this were perfectly reasonable somehow. And for the first time since Bim noticed something beneath the laughter, no one was laughing because he was small. They were laughing because he had answered. Because he had pushed back. Because somehow the joke had made the room for him. He looked down. Then, very quietly, I think I walked into another problem. Silence fell across the room again. Heckles stared at him. His grin widened. Too wide. No. He placed one hand over his chest. You walked in to a profession. The bell stitched into his coat. The bell stitched into his coat jingled softly, unevenly, as though each one objected to a different part of the statement. Heckles stepped in front of Bim and bent just enough to meet him at eye level. The cane tapped once against the floor. The curved handle caught the spotlight. For the briefest moment, pale motes shimmered around it, like dust, considering whether it wanted to become magic. Tell me something, Heckles said. His voice remained light, almost playful. When they called you a future pillar, did you believe them? The crowd reacted. The little laughter rose, but softer than before, more attentive, less interested in the joke than in the answer that might pull from him. The whole tent seemed to lean closer, watching, waiting. Heckles did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Bim stood beneath the spotlight, one hand resting against the brim of his hat. For once, it stayed in place. The room waited anyways. So did Bart. Even Analise had gone still. Bim looked down at his shoes, then at the pale floor beneath them, then back at Heckles. I don't know. The remaining laughter faded, not abruptly, but gently. Heckles' smile did not change, not even a little. But something behind his bright green eyes did. Attention, possibly. Real attention. So Bim swallowed. When they say those things, he began slowly, everyone sounds like they already knew what I was. The tent had become strangely quiet. No snickering lanterns, no whispering audience, no little sound waiting to turn against him. I didn't. His fingers tightened around the edge of his sleeve. They called me master before I knew where I even was. Where I am. I don't even know where I am. They called me heir. I don't even know what that is. Rather, and then they asked if I wanted to inherit, which that's a big word for me. I guess it means to recover or receive something. Annalise's expression softened. Bim stared at the floor again. And every time someone tells me I'm supposed to become, his voice grew smaller. It feels like they're remembering someone I haven't met yet. Hekkles remained crouched before him. The crooked smile was still there, but now it seemed less like a weapon, more like something held carefully between them. Bim lifted his eyes. So no, he whispered, I don't know if I believe any of them. I think I was afraid. They did. They kept saying, pillar, vessel, spectacle. I only got here yesterday. The room felt dead silent. There was no laughter now. None at all. Bim looked down again. I'm still trying to figure out how this hat works. His face showed a little frustration. Then, a snort. Tiny, sharp, coming from Analise. She clapped, a hand over her mouth. But it was too late. Far too late. Hekkles stared at her. Benzabark stared at her. The audience held itself together with visible pain because Bim was not joking, not even a little. That was the problem. Or perhaps the magic. Hekkles looked at him for a long moment. Then he crouched again, slowly, until they were eye to eye. Until the tent felt smaller around them, quieter. You know, that may be the smartest thing anyone has ever said in this tent. Yeah, at least today. Bim blinked. Really? Mm-hmm. Hekkles nodded solemnly. Everyone else walks in pretending they understand the story. He tilted his head. You admitted you're still reading the first page. The silence that followed was different, warm, not laughter this time, something gentler. Hekkles reached out. Bim stiffened, but Hekkles only adjusted the hat. A careful tug at the brim, a small turn, a light press against the crown. For once it stayed exactly where it belonged. There! Hekkles leaned back to inspect his work. The crooked grin returned, wide, dangerously wide. Now, the landlord can see. A simple ripple of laughter moved through the tent. Not at Bim, but around him. Hekkles rose and circled one hand towards Bim's clothes. And you have the outfit. That helps! Bim looked down at the formal cloak hanging from his narrow shoulders. Helps with what exactly? Convincing people you know what you're doing. The audience chuckled. Hekkles squinted at him dramatically. If I stand very far away, he took one step back, then another, and then closed one eye. And close one eye. He then proceeds to close the incorrect eye and lower my expectations. More laughter came from the tent. You look almost prepared. Hate returned to Bim's cheeks, but it did not burn quite the same way. The spotlight still weighed on him. The hat was still absurd. The jokes were still sharp around the edges, yet Hekkles had fixed the hat before making fun of it, and that mattered. Bim did not know why it mattered, only that it did. Hekkles opened both eyes and studied him. The trick, he said, is not looking as though you know everything. It's knowing which thing you're allowed to know. Friends of Bart, amber eyes gleamed. Analise lowered her hand from her mouth. Bim looked up at Hekkles. And pets? Hekkles considered. Pets are beyond all mortal understanding. One lantern overhead nodded gravely. Bim glanced up at it, then back at Hekkles. For the first time since entering the tent, the corner of his mouth moved only a little, but Hekkles saw it. Bim's fingers tightened at his sides. One part of him wanted to disappear, another part of him wanted to prove something, though he could not have said what. Then, Hekkles' tone changed. Not cruel, worse than cruel. Interested. You ever notice something, little light? He moved around Bim slower. The humor remained in his crooked smile, but something sharper had begun to look through it. Big titles make people lean closer. His cane struck the floor. The sound cut clearly beneath the last little bit of laughter. But small moments. Hekkles stopped behind him, close enough that Bim could sense him without turning. The mismatched bells on his coat gave an uncertain jingle. Still, make people decide. The tent quieted. Not completely, but enough. Hekkles leaned closer. His voice dropped until it felt meant for Bim alone, though every person in the room could still hear it. They decide whether you're funny, rather you're fragile, rather you're worth following. Bim's breath caught. The spotlight felt warmer now, too warm. Hekkles stepped back into view, his bright green eyes fixated on Bim. And right now? He tilted his head. They're deciding. No one laughed. Bim looked out at the audience. The faces that had seemed like one great blur of amusement now separated into people, smiles, eyes, strangers watching the way he stood beneath the light, watching the way he carried the cloak. Too large for him. A little too large for him. The future everyone seemed to know, except the person trapped inside it. His hat slipped. Bim caught the brim before it could fall over his eyes. Hekkles' smile widened. There, he said softly. That's a beginning. Bim kept hold of the hat. He did not look away from the crowd. The silence pressed around him, and for once he understood it was not empty. It was judgment, not the final kind, the waiting kind. The kind that could still become anything. He turned towards the audience with a careless little shrug. I like him. He hasn't run yet. A few quiet chuckles moved through the tent. Then Hekkles glanced back at Bim, his grin crooked and bright and far too knowing. That is either courage, he tilted his head, or he has not realized that he can. The laughter returned, warm, but Bim heard the difference now. This time, he did not push him out of the moment. It helped the door open. And Hekkles, still watching him from the corner of one green eye, seemed to be waiting to see whether Bim would step through. Sharp. Testing. Bim's cheeks burned. His first instinct was to look at Analise. For help. For reassurance. For some small sign telling him what to do next. But Hekkles had made the moment too visible for that. If Bim looked away now, everyone would see. If he shrank, they would see that too. So he stayed where he was, tiny, formal, trying very, very hard not to tremble. His hat slipped again. Bim caught the brim with one hand and pushed it back into place. Then, before fear could block the words inside him, he looked at Hekkles. I know I can run. The laughter thinned, but it didn't stop, just simply thinned. Heckles turned slowly towards him. Bim swallowed. His voice trembled, but he forced it onward. I'm good at running. The tent went still. The words had come out plain. Too plain, a child's truth set down in the middle of a joke where no one had expected one. For the first time, Heckles did not smile. Bim simply looked at his shoes, then made himself look up again. But Miss Band said, running is right sometimes. Annalise's expression softened once. At the center of the ring, Benzabark remained perfectly still, his measured smile unchanged, watching, listening, as though every laugh and pause had unfolded exactly as he intended. Until this small, stubborn truth. This had not been rehearsed. Heckles' crook again returned slowly, different now, less sharp at the edges. Oh, he murmured. The bells on his coat jingled as he shifted his weight. So he listens. Bim frowned. Sometimes. The audience laughed again, softer, kinder. Heckles pointed the curved end of his cane towards him. Good answer. Bim blinked. It was? No. A small pause. It was true. Better. Benzabark's smile widened by the smallest degree. Analise crossed her arms, her tail flicking once behind her. She looked far too proud for someone who had done absolutely nothing. Heckles returned to the space in front of Bim and bowed so deeply that his patchwork bowler threatened to slide off his own head. He caught it at the last moment. The tent chuckled. Welcome to humility, little master. Heckles straightened. The bright green eyes gleamed. Lesson 1. If you cannot stop them laughing. He turned, gesturing loosely towards the watching crowd. Choose what you are willing to let them laugh at. Bim looked out at the faces beneath the warm golden lanterns. They were still smiling, still watching, but they no longer seemed like one great creature waiting to swallow him. They were people. Strange people. Impossible people. People who had seen him frightened and he had not turned away. Bim looked back at Heckles. What if they laugh at the wrong thing? Heckles smiled. Then he tilted his head. Then you correct them. With words? With whatever works. Benzabark cleared his throat directly. Yes. Heckles glanced toward him. Yes. Preferably words. A surge of laughter passed through the tent. Bim's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Heckles noticed. Heckles tapped his cane once more against the floor. And now, he said, we discover rather the little master can survive lesson 2. Bim looked up at the watching faces, at the room that had turned him into a joke and then somehow into something else. He did not understand it, not fully, but he could feel the shape of it. A joke could hurt. A joke could hide the hurting. A joke could also open a door, and perhaps, if he learned carefully enough, a joke could become armor itself. The spotlight remained fixed on him, like gold, warm, unforgiving. His eyes began to sting, not from the brightness, but from the pressure of everything. From being watched and weighed and gently pulled apart before a room of strangers who were deciding what he was before he ever even learned how to decide what he was for himself. Bim held his breath. His throat tightened. The hat suddenly felt heavier than it ever should have. The tent felt too warm, the laughter too close. Even the silence between the laughter seemed to press against him. He blinked once, then again. The stinging did not leave. There were too many eyes, too many titles, too many things he was supposed to become. His hands tightened at his side, his small fingers curling into the formal fabric. The clothes fit him now. That did not make them feel any better. His lower lip trembled, just a little, then a tear slipped free. Hekkles leaned closer, reading the tear a bit too late. A little too lightly, his grin began to sharpen around another joke. Oh no, don't tell me the pillar's about to! Enough! Annalise's voice cut through the tent. She did not shout. She did not need to. The word carried enough heat on its own. Every laugh died. Hekkles froze mid-lean. For the first time since stepping into the spotlight, his crooked smile faltered, but only a fraction. Annalise stepped forward. The warmth of the tent changed with her. It sharpened. Lantern flames nearest her flared orange. Their painted smiles vanished beneath a sudden brightness. Heat shimmered faintly around her shoulders, and her red tail lashed once behind her. Not lazy now, not amused. Bim looked up at her through wet eyes. She did not look at him first. She kept staring at Hekkles. He's 5. Simple, flat, and deadly. A small silence followed. Hekkles straightened slowly. The bell sewn to his coat gave one faint uneven jangle. Annalise crossed the remaining distance and stepped beside Bim. Close enough to her that her warmth reached him. Close enough that she became a wall. He arrived yesterday, she continued. Her voice remained level, which made the burn hotter. He lost his home yesterday. He was given a new name. Yesterday. Threnzabark's smile vanished. He stood before Threnzable's court this morning and was told he would become something none of us will ever fully understand. Her yellow eyes narrowed. He has been called a pillar, a vessel, a spectacle, an heir. Each word landed harder than the last, and he is still trying to understand his own hat. No one laughed, not a single person. Analise moved a half step in front of Bim. And you're deciding the first thing he needed was to be humiliated? Hekkles' expression changed. The performance did not disappear entirely, but the person beneath it came forward. I thought he was holding. He was. Annalise's tail struck the floor once. That does not mean you keep adding weight until he breaks. Silence settled over the ring. Heavy now. Ashamed. The spotlight still held Bim, but it no longer felt as though it belonged to Hekkles. Annalise lifted one hand. The white gold beam flickered, then softened into amber. Bim drew his first full breath in what felt like minutes. Annalise finally looked down at him. The fury in her face did not vanish. It made room. Little master, she said gently, you do not have to earn the right to be overwhelmed. Another tear slipped down Bim's cheek. This time, he did not hide it. Annalise reached down and took Bim's hand. Her fingers were warm, not burning, just warm enough to remind him that someone had noticed. Someone had moved. Bim tried to wipe his face with his sleeve, but the fabric was too formal, too neat, too new. It caught awkwardly against his cheek, and somehow that made another tear fall. Annalise's expression softened almost at once. Oh, little spark, she murmured. The name slipped out before she seemed to think about it. Bim looked up at her. Hekkles stood very still. Threnzabark's measured smile had faded into something unreadable. The entire tent of humility seemed to hold its breath. And I think we're at the halfway point, which, yeah, we're going to do a little bit longer. I'm a little late, but I also started 10 minutes late. I'm actually a little further than what I thought I'd be, but I'm going to do what I always do. So about halfway through the story, if you're still with me, if you are, thank you very much. I do something that I pretty much called burning the midnight oil or the midnight ritual. It is essentially, if you're a partaker of cannabis, that's what I do, but that's not the only limit. This is just what I do now. If you are a person that enjoys, say, sneaking to the fridge to go grab that Snickers you hid from your family just to get a bite and put it back, go do it now. If you need to go to the bathroom, go do it now. If you're a smoker, stop smoking, but go do it now. I can't stop you. I can just tell you a few secrets about how to help yourself get past it. I want everybody to be aware that it is very, very hot this year for a lot of us. Some places slightly warmer than others. Remember to hydrate, take care of yourself, and join me for burning the midnight oil, aka the dabbening. It's happening now. So you got green and it's mean. Join me. We're gonna go ahead and warm this up. I'm gonna throw on my little beat, and I'm gonna go ahead and say who this is because they crossed over at a good time. This is kind of jazzy. This person is called Victoria, and their song is called 3A Cypher Beneath the Blue Hour. That wasn't too bad, but we're going to play what I put together for this chapter and play it all the way through while we sit here and talk and perform the dabbing.
Under lantern light.
Obviously not too loud, not as loud as the other. Fix my ear because
I felt it stay.
No. I guess I'd be worried if it did. It seems to do it every episode at this point. Which is kind of funny, but it
Slowly becoming something I can't name. Standing in a light that don't feel the same. They tried to break what I couldn't see. Now I see what it made of me. His laughs cuts clean through doubt, throws the truth every time it's allowed.
for those of you
Fire
still
beside me,
sticking there,
lighting the dark. She holds the night while I find the spark. They couldn't undo what I've become. I couldn't turn, I couldn't run. I stood my ground under their eyes. Felt every word but didn't hide. They called me out, I stayed anyway. If this is what I'm meant to be,
that one's for me. I'm gonna do one for those of you who can't do it. You don't let you do it. Just gotta hit your face.
placed in a space they thought I'd break, but
Should we
I
take the third one?
learned to bend. I learned to take every glance, every test, every line turned into something I made mine. I walked with those who stood beside while the crowd roared loud from every side. Not against
Normally I would come up with a message, but with exception to mental health, there's not really too much going on this month.
shape and the consequence. I stood my ground under their eyes.
Hope everyone out there is having a good night. I'm gonna go ahead and get out here.
Felt every word but let it run.
So wonderful.
They pushed me out, I stayed inside. If this is where I'm meant to
I just need some
be,
air.
I won't
So,
divide.
hashtag. Oil's done. I know some of you probably smoking your J, so I'll give it a couple more minutes. know that.
Moonlight waiting in a place where the sun don't show its face. Still we move, still we stand, still we build what we don't understand.
Okay.
Heart pounds, tent breeze, light holds.
Analise turned back to Heckles.
I see.
There's no difference, you said quietly, between teaching someone to laugh at themselves and teaching them they are alone when everyone else does. The word struck harder than her throat had. Heckles' face instantly changed. However, only by a fraction. The black and white painted around his mouth suddenly made his smile look like something he had forgotten to wear. For once, no answer came immediately. That silence changed the room more than shouting ever could have. Friends of Bart watched him, patient, waiting. Heckles lowered his cane. It came back to life. So, let me put this out. Anyways. Patient waiting, Heckles lowered his cane. His bright green eyes moved to Ben, to the tear shining on his cheek, to the small hand gripping Annalise's hand, to the oversized hat that had finally stopped being funny. A long moment passed. Silence. Then, Heckles crouched, slowly, no flourish, no performance. He lowered himself beneath Ben's eyes, directly to eye level, rather than continuing to loom over him. Ah, he said softly. There was no grin now, only the sound. Small, understanding, arriving late, but still arriving. I misjudged the edge. Ben sniffled. He did not know what that meant. Heckles glanced at Annalise, then returned his attention to Bim. That was my mistake. The room remained silent. Bim stared at him, still trembling. Heckles placed one hand against the brim. And crooked crooked his own bowler until it bowed. Not deeply, not theatrically, just honest looking. I apologize, little master. A little higher next time. The title sounded different now. Less like a joke, more like respect searching for the right shape. Bim swallowed. Said furniture before. I don't like everyone laughing at me. His voice was still small. Heckles nodded once. Good! Annalise's eyes flashed. Heckles raised one hand quickly. No. Not good that it hurt. His gaze stayed on Bim. Good that you know where it hurt. Bim frowned through his tears. Heckles leans. Heckles leans softly back, giving him room. This is why you don't smoke. Most people spend years pretending they have no edges, he said. Then they blame everyone else for crossing them. Ben looked towards the audience. No one laughed. At least, not now. What do I do if they... I'm confused. Cross mine? Heckles tapped One finger gets his cane. You tell them. If they care, they stop. If they don't, if they do not, this woman's smile returned, but only faintly. Then you learn something useful about them. Then looked at Analise. She squeezed his hand. Hekkles lowered his head once more. I should have stopped sooner. This time, he did not decorate the apology. He let it stand on its own. Bim studied him for a long moment. Then wiped his cheek with the back of his hand. His hat slipped forward. This time no one laughed. Bim pushed it back up. Hekkles watching carefully. May I make one observation? He asked. Analise stared sharpened. Hekkles glanced at her. A gentle one. Bim hesitated and nodded. Hekkles pointed toward the hat. It appears to behave better when no one is enjoying its failure. Bim looked up at the grill, then back at him. I think it gets nervous. A tiny sound escaped someone in the audience. Not laughter, but almost. Hekkles pressed his lips together. So, I decide, he said. And this time, his head stayed kind. Bim blinked. Hekkles settled back on his heels. Quieter now. Humility is not letting people step on you and calling it education. Ben's Park Vampire's eyes sharpened slightly. Hekkles noticed them, but he continued anyways. Humility is knowing your size without despising yourself for being small. The tent remained utterly still. Ben wiped his cheek again. Analise reached into her sleeve and produced a small square of cloth. He had no idea where she had been keeping it. She placed it gently in his hand. Ben pressed it beneath one eye. Am I still small? He asked. Hekkles looked at him, raised one eyebrow, then looked at the hat, then looked back down at him. The crooked smile touched his painted mouth, but it was softer this time. Yes. Bim's lower lip started to tremble. Hekkles leaned forward. But small is not the same as lesser. And anyone who tells you otherwise is usually standing on a box. A few people nearly started to laugh, but the sound did not quite escape. The tent of humility remained suspended in a strange stillness. Amber lantern light hanging above them, while every face watched something none of them had expected to see. Not a joke, not a performance, a mistake. And what someone chose to do after making that mistake. Bim stood beneath the soft spotlight, very small, very quiet. One hand clutched Analyse's clothes. The other hand hovered over the brim of his hat, ready to catch it if it betrayed him again. He studied Hekkles, the painted face, the uneven smile, the bright green eyes that no longer looked quite so certain. The room waited, because they were deciding again, not about Bim this time, about Hekkles, about whether he would hide behind another joke, whether he would turn the apology into part of a performance, whether he had meant any of it at all. Hekkles held Bim's gaze for one long moment. Then he sighed, not loudly nor theatrically, just honestly. Ah! He tilted his head. Little bell sewn into his coat jingled once, unevenly and quiet. Disaster! Ben blinked. Heckles pointed solely at himself. I have become one. A few soft laughs escaped around the tent. Careful ones. Testing whether laughter was allowed to return. Heckles stared in the middle distance with great disappointment. Very unfortunate. Ben lowered the cloth. You were already strange. Heckles' eyes snapped back to him. The tent remained silent. Ben immediately looked certain. I'm sorry. No. Heckles slowly rose. His crooked smile returned, brighter now, but no longer sharpened at Ben's expense. Do not apologize. He turned towards the audience and spread one hand. The landlord has issued his first accurate assessment. The tent began to laugh, gently at first. Ben, still startled at the sound, but it didn't close around him this time. And there goes the ear again. Ha ha ha. Heckles glanced down. Was that all right? Ben looked up at the smiling faces, at Analise beside him, at Heckles waiting for an answer instead of deciding it for him. Ooh, I had that a little loud. I apologize. I wasn't thinking. That should be my fault. Thank you for pinging me. I apologize. You kept me up. I apologize. Then he nodded. Yes. Heckles placed one hand over his chest. Excellent. I remain employable. Professionally devastating. I may never recover. A few more laughs escaped. Small ones. Careful ones. Heckles lowered himself the rest of the way and sat cross-legged on the floor before him. Not above him, not towering over him anymore. Just there. Painted face, patchwork clothes. Ooh. Perfect smile and all. He looked up. The landlord. Ben stiffened. Yes? Heckles was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when I was small. Yes, missed. Ooh. I've just been reading. The tent leaned closer. Actually leaned. Even friends of ours, every lives narrowed, and because somehow the thought of Heckles ever having been small seemed almost impossible. Heckles pointed at himself. This. He made a vague gesture over the face and coat. Has never looked young. A few soft laughs moved through the room. Heckles waited for them to fade. When I was little, the smile softened. Just a little. People laughed first, then stared at him. Heckles looked up towards the lanterns. At my face. At my voice. And things I said before I knew anyone thought they were strange. Bell sewn into his coat shifted softly as he shrugged, and eventually his green eyes lowered again. I became very good at laughing first. Then studied him, really studied him, and suddenly the strange painted man with the impossible smile looked different. Yeah, see, I got too far. That's fine. Not less strange, just larger inside, as though there had always been something behind the jokes, waiting for the room to become quiet enough to hear it. Hekkles met Bim's eyes. Do you know why I like jokes? Bim slowly shook his head. Hekkles smiled, honestly. Because when everyone is laughing together, it becomes harder to tell when laughter ended and the hurting began. The room fell silent, into absolute silence. Analise looked at him, really stared at him. Then Zabark's smile disappeared entirely. It was gone. Hekkles blinked. Then glanced around the tent. Then made a vague gesture with one hand. Oh! That was much sadder than I intended. For another moment, no one moved. Then, somewhere in the audience, snort. Tiny. Another answered it. Someone laughed. Then someone else. Until warmth began to roll through the entire tent again. Not sharp, not testing, but gentle. The kind of laughter that did not ask anyone to bleed for it. Hekkles stared at the crowd. Then looked back at Bim. There. A smile touched his painted mouth. That one. He pointed weakly towards the audience. That was on purpose. Bim studied him, the paint, little bells, uneven smile that had once seemed too wide and now looked as though it had been built. It had been built to hold far more than anyone could ever know. Then, very quietly, Bim asked, "Did people laugh at your hat too?" Once again, the tent fell silent. Hekkles stared at him. The entire tent stared at him. Slowly, Hekkles reached up, touched the crooked brim of his patchwork bowler, and whispered, "You wound me." The tent immediately exploded. Laughter crashed against the warm canvas walls and rolled through the lantern light in great bright waves. Not cruel, not testing, nor aimed, but shared. And this time, Bim laughed too. At first, it was only a breath that escaped him. Then another, small, bright, unsteady to diffuse. The sort of laughter that seemed startled to discover it was still alive. Hekkles went still. He actually sat still for a moment. The bright green eyes widened. Around them, the tent softened at the edges. The spotlight no longer felt like a hand holding Bim in place. It felt warm, almost golden. Bim laughed again. A little louder this time. His hat slipped. He got it. That only made him laugh harder. Analise covered her mouth, but now she was smiling through wet eyes. Even Threnzabart looked away for a moment. Though whether to hide the smile or something else, Bim could not really tell. Hekkles remained seated on the floor before him, watching, not performing, not calculating, simply watching for the small boy beneath the impossible hat inside a room that had almost made him cry. Then Hekkles smiled, not wide, not sharp, but just enough. "There you are," he said softly. That was me. There you are. he said softly. Ben's laughter faded into a breathless little grin. Where? Hekkles tapped one finger lightly against Ben's chest. Still in there. I think I got confused in how many, because there's a lot of images that I did. We can't do that part. There we go. Oh, no. There's someone here. The audience noticed. Of course, they noticed. Analise noticed too. They were just perked at once. Friends of Bark remained perfectly still, though his amber eyes narrowed by the smallest degree, watching because something had changed. Not the tent. Bim. No, the laugh slipped before he could stop it. Bim clapped both his hands over his mouth as though he had broken something. The room went quiet, like a blink. Then pointed at him. No. Bim froze, pure panic. Hekkles sprang to his feet so quickly that one of the bells on his coat rang out in protest. No, no, no. Yeah, see? Oh, we get the idea, right? Right. He pointed harder. Illegal? Bim stared at him. Bear stared at him over his fingers. What? Hekkles wheeled toward the audience, wild eyes and accusing. Did everyone witness that? The crowd leaned forward all at once. Hekkles swung his fingers back towards Bim. He laughed. The grave silence settled. Hekkles slowly surveyed the room. Without paperwork. The tent then shattered. Analise doubled over. Gone, fully gone. Friends of Bark lowered his head, not laughing. Absolutely not. There would be no evidence, no such thing. Hekkles began pacing across the ring. No permit. A sharp turn. No registration. No formal declaration of emotional intent. He stopped and pointed his cane at Bim. Unregulated joy. The audience roared. Bim blinked. He looked at the laughing faces, then at Hekkles, then very quietly replied, That's not a thing. Hekkles froze mid-step. Slowly he turned. The laughter fell away. Hekkles stared. Oh no! Bim's hands dropped in his mouth. What? Hekkles crouched directly in front of him again. Green eyes widened with terrible realization. You recognize nonsense twice now. Bim frowned. Yeah? Hekkles looked at Friends of Bark. Sir barks a lot. Benzel raised one eyebrow. We may have a problem. A second problem? Bim asked. Hekkles turned back then. The quick return returned. Worse. He leaned closer. You're beginning to understand adults. Bim considered that, then glanced toward Analise, who was still trying to recover. Is that bad? Analise strained enough to answer. Extremely. Oh, I said that like me. Extremely. Hekkles placed one hand over his heart. And it's beautiful! The audience laughed again. Bim did not cover his mouth this time. The sound still startled him when it came. Small and bright. But he let it live. His grin softened for half a heartbeat before the performance slipped neatly back into place. Very well, Hekkles said. while rising. The joy remains unlicensed. He tapped his cane against the floor, under close professional supervision. Hekkles spoke to him again. Little landlord. Jim swallowed. He tapped his cane one time. Yes? Hekkles placed both hands gently on his shoulders. A question. Did you just correct nonsense? Jim blinked. Yes? Then slowly looked towards Lenzabark, towards Analise, towards the audience. His green eyes widened again. This kid's adapting! The tent erupted again. Laughter rolled beneath the lanterns, though painted smiles on the patchwork colors around all the impossible people gathered beneath the canvas felt a little strange. And somewhere inside it, Bim felt something strange happen. Not safety, not certainty, not understanding. Something smaller, something lighter. For the first time since entering the tent of humility, he forgot to hold his breath. The laughter continued, then faltered, not stopped, faltered. Like something running too quickly and catching its foot. Bim moved, only a little. A shift of the shoe, a slow straining of the spine. Most of the audience did not notice at first. The tear on Bim's cheek did not fall any further. His breathing steadied. His fingers loosened at his side. His expression became still. Not empty, but calm. He was no longer uncertain. The calm of a child was waiting to be told, rather he had answered correctly. It was the calm of something inside him realizing that the room could look if it wished. He did not have to disappear simply because it did. The spotlight caught his skin, and the color changed. Pale warmth deepened across his cheeks, brightened along his throat, then bloomed into visible bubblegum pink. The color spread over his face and down his small hands, soft and strange beneath the white gold light, as though another shape had been sleeping just beneath his skin and had finally been given permission to breathe. His ears shifted, only slight at first, then they lengthened, stretching beyond their familiar human shape. The laughter died. Hekkles' hands slipped from Bim's shoulders. His crooked smile vanished. Analise went utterly still. Then, Benzabark carefully measured the expression that sharpened the surprise breaking through his control for the first time. Bim realized very slowly the oversized hat no longer looked so ridiculous. Or perhaps the room had remembered there was stranger things than hats. His eyes had been wet only moments before. Now something shone behind them, bright, awake, not fire, not magic exactly. Will, small, new, but unmistakably there. The silence deepened. Bim lifted one hand and pushed the brim of his hat back into place, but this time it seemed to stay, and no one else laughed. Hekkles stared at him again. For once, he was properly speechless. Bim's voice came out quiet, even almost polite. I don't think I like this lesson. The word struck harder than any joke had. Something moved through the crowd. Not laughter, unease, recognition. The startled attention of people realizing the strange had shifted beneath their feet, and that the smallest person in the room had been the one to move it. Analise took one careful step closer. Bim. He did not look at her. His gaze remained on Hekkles, not accusing, not frightened, just still. You said, you said small isn't lesser, Bim said. Hekkles blinked once, slowly. Yes, he answered. His voice was quieter now. Bim tilted his head. The movement was slight. Strange beneath the oversized hat and the newly lengthened shape of his ears. Then why did everyone need me to hurt before they believed it? The tent of humility was silent, not humbled, but pierced. Heckle's mouth opened. Then nothing came out. No clever turn. No crooked answer. No joke sharp enough to slip around the truth Bim had placed between them. Benzbark's smile was gone entirely. Analise stood close enough to reach him, but did not touch him yet. She seemed to understand that this moment belonged to Bim. All around the ring, painted lanterns watched with their bright little faces. None of them smiled now. Bim stood beneath white gold light, bubblegum pink, small, unblinking. The last tear remained against his cheek, but no new one followed. He was not fearless. His heart still beat too quickly. His hands still wanted to curl into the fabric of his side. But he was no longer trying to disappear. That was what changed him. Not anger, not power. The simple, stubborn decision to remain where everyone could see him. Heckles lowered his eye. The bells of the coat gave a faint sound as his shoulders settled. You shouldn't have needed to, he said. No performance, no applause for effect, only the answer. Bim watched him. Then, why did I? Heckles flinched. Small, but everyone saw. Because the room was watching him now. Benzbark stepped forward at last, one measured pace. The lesson exceeded its purpose. The lesson exceeded its purpose, he said. Bim turned his eyes towards him. Benzbark stopped. Perhaps it was the color. Perhaps the stillness. Perhaps it was simply the first time Bim had looked at him without searching for permission. That means it was wrong, Bim said. Benzbark's amber gaze sharpened. For one breath, the entire tent seemed to brace. Then he inclined his head. Yes. The words fell without declaration. Bim looked between them. At Heckles, kneeling on the floor. At Benzbark, standing beneath the lanterns. At the audience, who had laughed because laughter was what the room had taught them to do. His chin lifted by the smallest degree. The hat remained steady. You can teach me, he said. His voice trembled now, but only a little. But you don't get to make me cry and call it helping. No one moved. Heckles looked up at him. Something raw passed through his green eyes. Not shame alone, but respect. The difficult kind. The kind that had to be earned by admitting someone smaller had seen more clearly than you had in the moment. He bowed his head. No, he said, we do not. The light around Bim softened. Not dimmed, but softened. Gold gathered around pink skin, wet eyes, and a child's solemn face. He did not look dangerous because he had stopped being a child. He looked dangerous because everyone in the room had finally remembered that a child could tell the truth. And truth spoke plainly enough, it could cut through an entire tent. Only if for a fraction. Then, Hekkles gained his grin back, not returning to what it had been, changing into something new. Interest slipped through interest slipped through it as he rose and began to circle Bim once more. The bells hidden in the seams of his coat whispered with every step. Well now, he said. Dangerous delight brought his voice. There you are. He leaned slightly as he moved, watching Bim from the corner of his painted eye again, still frightened. Still frightened, he said. A pause fell between them. A quiet moment, but no longer disappearing. Annalise's tail flicked once behind her. Hekkles! He lifted one hand without looking away from Bim. Carefully, blame girl. His tone was lighter than the warning deserved, but he did not stop circling. The lesson is still breathing. Annalise did not relax. Tons of barks remained motionless, too motionless. His amber eyes narrowed, fixated entirely on Bim now. Hekkles tapped his cane once against the floor. Tell me, little master. The spotlight wormed. The tent held his breath. Was that anger? Bim stared at him, calm, pink, small. No. Hekkles tilted his head. No! Bim smoothed the edge of his sleeve with slow, unsettling patience. It was exciting. The room went utterly silent. Hekkles smiled, and Hekkles' smile twitched. For the first time, it looked less like control and more like curiosity slipping its leash. Exciting what? Bim looked beyond the tent, at the faces beneath the lanterns, at the laughter caught behind those lips, at all the waiting eyes that had expected him to shrink, and then break down and cry, then become something simple enough for them to usually understand. He looked back at Hekkles. That I don't have to give you the answer that you want. A ripple moved through the audience, soft, sharp, and alive. Hekkles stopped breathing. Annalise's yellow eyes widened. Frenzied voice. Smile returned slowly. Not wide, not mocking, but very pleased. Bim stood beneath the spotlight, his impossible hat resting perfectly still above his newly blinked ears. But for one fragile moment, he looked exactly like what Frenzible had named him. Not a child pretending to matter, not a joke dressed in formal clothes. A beginning, not because he had become larger, because he had stopped asking the room for permission to remain small. The bells on Hekkles' coat gave one more faint, uneven jingle, then another, then suddenly stopped. The tiny sound felt enormous. Then Hekkles rose. Not dramatically, nor theatrically, but he actually froze. His grin remained exactly where it was, but something behind it had been struck clean. Bim had not answered the question. He had rejected the right to be questioned that way, and Hekkles, who had built an entire profession out of controlling where the laughter landed, had not seen it coming. That somehow made the situation worse. The audience watched. Analise stared. Zanzibar's ambered eyes widened by the smallest fraction because everyone in the tent had heard it. Not only the words, the target. Bim stood beneath the spotlight, bubblegum pink with a warm gold glow, one hand resting against the brim of his hat, small, still, and unmoving. Hekkles turned his head, very slow. He looked down at the bells stitched along his sleeve, at the trinkets hanging from his coat, then back at Bim. Silence. Absolute silence. Rude. His voice was tiny, very tiny. The room held it together, barely. Then blinked. Hekkles raised one accusing finger. You are 5. Bim stared at him. Yes. You should not possess that kind of precision. Bim frowned. I don't know what precision is. Hekkles' eyes widened. That just made things worse. The audience cracked. Not completely. Small sounds escaped. Snorts, coughs. Someone near the back folded forward and disappeared from behind the person in front of them. Hekkles spun towards the crowd. No. Then he pointed at him. No. Then he turned sharply towards Zanzibar and asked him again. Zanzibar looked away at once. All at once, in almost a cowardice form. Pure cowardice. Hekkles stared at the side of his face. Even you felt that. Zanzibar adjusted one white glove. He offered no reply. Hekkles slowly turned towards Analise. Analise covered her mouth. The tail shook violently behind her. No help there. None. At last, Hekkles looked back at Bim. A long pause passed between them. Then, they sat there in silence. Bim met Hekkles' stare without shrinking. The room waited for Hekkles to recover control. Hekkles seemed to realize it. That was the worst part. He lowered his fingers, straightened his coat, adjusted his crooked bowler with wounded dignity, then drew himself up as though preparing to reclaim the entire tent. You did that on purpose, he said. Bim considered. No. Hekkles shut his eyes. A sound escaped Zanzibar, small, suspiciously close to a lap. Hekkles' eyes snapped open. Bim tilted his head. I only answered. The audience broke. Laughter bustled across the ring. Warm and helpless. Hekkles stood in the middle of it, bells trembling against his sleeve, his expression caught somewhere between betrayal and professional admiration. Bim watched him. Then, after a moment, the smallest smile touched his face. Hekkles saw it. He pointed again. There it is. Bim's smile vanished. What? That. Hekkles narrowed his eyes. You knew that was funny. Bim hesitated only for a second. Maybe. Hekkles pressed one hand over his heart. The tent quieted around him. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, the landlord has begun collecting rent. Unblinking. The hat didn't slip. Not one bell on Hekkles' coat gave off a tiny jingle, betraying Hekkles himself. And suddenly, Hekkles understood. Really understood. Not only the joke, not the moment, but the lesson. Van had set Bim here to learn humility. But humility had teeth. To stand beneath the eyes of an entire room, to be laughed at, to cry, to remain, and then to answer anyway. That was not humiliation. That was serving it. Hekkles stared at him. Then slowly, very, very slowly, his smile returned. But it was smaller now, realer. He placed one hand over his chest and bowed deeply, no flourish, no exaggeration, a real bow. Ah! The tent went quiet. Hekkles lifted his head. A direct hit. Bim stood beneath the spotlight, bubblegum pink beneath the amber glow. His small hand still resting against the brim of his hat. Hekkles looked up at him from beneath the crooked bowler and mismatched paint. His green eyes were bright, warm, proud. Then he sighed dramatically. Disaster. Disaster. Absolute disaster. The child has learned offense. Michael spun and pointed towards the audience. He's adapting faster than any of you. The tent started laughing again. Laughter crashed against the canvas and shook the smiling lanterns overhead. But this time, Bim did not shrink. He did not look away. He did not reach for Analise. He stood inside the laughter and felt something shift. Not confidence, but something smaller. Something first. The realization that the room was no longer happening to him. It was happening with him. He had not struck wildly. He had not tried to wound Hekkles back. He had simply seen where the truth belonged and placed it there. The laughter rolled around him, warm, helpless, shared. Bim's mouth twitched. Then, carefully, he let himself smile. Hekkles saw it. His own grin widened. Not like a blade this time, but recognition. Benzabark stepped forward at last. His measured composure settling back into place. Lesson 1, he said, appears to have become unruly. Hekkles adjusted his bowler. The best lessons usually do. Bim looked between them. Was that a lesson? Grins of bark. Amber eyes settled on him. No. I read the verse like that. Bim waited. Bunzabark's smile returned by one precise degree. That was the introduction. Bim absorbed that. Then he looked at Hekkles. The painted man had restored his crooked grin, but it sat differently now, wounded around the edges, proud beneath the performance, and trying very hard not to admit either one. Bim tilted his head. Is the next part where he acts upset because he's proud of me? Hekkles continued to grin. This now. Alright, Hekkles could remain, but no longer fit as easily as it did a moment ago. Something tightened beneath the paint. A small flicker, small enough most people missed it. But no one in this tent did. Not this time. His bright green eyes sharpened on Bim. The amusement inside them changed shape for the first time. Since Hekkles had stepped into the light, Bim was no longer the one being peeled open. Everyone felt it. Then the room broke. Laughter exploded. It exploded through the tent. Not scattered, unified, violent and not scattered, unified, as if it were violent in its suddenness. He who has folded first, his shoulders shaking at the sound of as it sounds like toward three of them. Others followed. Others followed at once, hands striking benches, bodies tipping sideways, the entire room collapsing from held breath and the helpless noise. Even Threnzabark lost control. A sharp bark of laughter escaped him, unmeasured, unplanned. His careful composure cracked as he leaned back and braced one hand against his side. No perfect pause, no precise delivery, just gone, completely gone. Oh, that landed. He broke off, laughed harder, actually harder, then pointed weakly towards Hekkles. He saw you. Hekkles turned, slowly, very slowly. No. The laughter surged. Hekkles raised one accusing finger. No. He pointed directly at Threnzabark. No. No. You don't get to become an audience member. That only made it worse. Analise bent completely in half, laughing into both hands, while her tail lashed wildly behind her. The lanterns overhead grew brighter, warmer, as the lieutenant himself understood what had happened. The whole room had tipped, because everyone had felt the exact instant the painted man, who read people for sport, had been read in return. Hekkles looked around, at he who was nearly falling out of his seat, at strangers clutching their sides, at Analise losing all remaining dignity, at Threnzabark actively failing to breathe with precision. Then his gaze returned to Bim. The laughter thinned. Bim stood beneath the spotlight, still bubblegum pink, still long-eared, tiny tuxedo neat against his now narrow frame. The oversized hat perfectly still. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply waited. Hekkles narrowed his eyes, then pointed at Bim accusingly. After a moment, he redirected his finger at Threnzabark. Threnzabark looked up, still recovering. Yes? You brought me a counterattack. The tank quieted. Threnzabark blinked. Then, a grin spread slowly across his face. Wide. Dangerously wide. No! I brought you a student. Hekkles looked at Bim. Bim looked back. Neither of them moved. Then, one bell on Hekkles' sleeve gave a faint traitor's jingle. Bim glanced down at it. Hekkles immediately covered the bell with one hand. Not a word. Bim tilted his head. Didn't say anything. The ten erupted again. The room leaned closer. Hekkles stared at Bim. At the oversized hat. At the tiny shoes. At the bubblegum pink skin. At the little boy standing beneath the spotlight as though he had somehow grown without becoming very much taller. Then, Hekkles sighed, long, slow, and defeated. The bells along his coat jingled softly, offering a mournful little accompaniment. He crouched until they were eye to eye. For once, he did not circle, he did not inspect. He did not search for the softest place to press. He simply looked at Bim, then extended one hand. Congratulations. For what? Hekkles gave him a tired smile. For surviving your first lesson. His voice softened. And for striking back without becoming cruel. The laughter in the tank quieted. Warm now. Gentle. Hekkles tilted his head. Do you know how rare that is? Bim stared at the offered hand, then at Hekkles. No, I don't. The room fell silent. Absolute silent. Heckles froze. Analise made a choking sound. Principal sat down. Not gracefully. Or not, well, Prince Mark sat down, not gracefully, not precisely. He simply folded into the nearest chair. As though his legs had abandoned the profession of standing. Then the tone of humility died all over again, lacked the chorus through the room. Heckles remained crouched before a gun. His hand still extended, his expression caught between devastation and pride. At last, Finn placed his small hand in Heckles. Heckles closed his fingers around it. None, he said solemnly. We have learned from our mistakes. Suddenly, the tent rose louder, and that's where I'm going to cut it, because there's more. So if you made it this far, sorry it's a little long, but I felt like I wasn't reading enough, so maybe I need to cut it back a little bit. But I would like to thank you if you made it this far. If you enjoyed this, let me know. I am trying to do better. My beginnings have become better. I'm becoming better timed. I'm using the system better. I'm stuttering less, still occasionally. I'm trying to do better, but you know, that's what this is all about. And if you made it this far, thank you. I'm going to close out how I usually do. If you're out there and you're in the air, the sky, the sea or land, driving or on a boat or on a plane or a blimp or whatever, just remember to make it home safely. Remember to make it home. Someone in the world loves you. You're not alone. And I do this every Friday, 10 minutes earlier than I did tonight. But I had an error, so if you're out there, thank you for watching, and have a good night. Until next time.
Under lantern light, I felt it stay. Slowly becoming something I can't name, standing in a light that don't feel the same. They tried to break what I couldn't see. Now I see what it made of me. His laughs cuts clean through doubt, throws the truth every time it's allowed. Fire beside me, lighting the dark. She holds the night while I find the spark. They couldn't undo what I've become. I couldn't turn, I couldn't run. I stood my ground under their eyes. Felt every word but didn't hide. They called me out, I stayed anyway. If this is what I'm meant to be, I won't look lost every line, turned into something I made mine. I walked with those who stood beside while the crowd roared loud from every side. Not against me, not above, just part of something we all become. Spinning circles till it made sense, losing shape in the consequence. I stood my ground under their eyes, felt every word but let it rise. They pushed me out, I stayed inside. If this is where I'm meant to be, I won't divide. Moonlight waiting in the place where the sun don't show its face. Still we move, still we stand, still we build what we don't understand. Heart pounds, tent breeze, light holds, I see. I stood my ground, I found my place. Not in their lines, but in this space. They couldn't stop what I became. I didn't lose myself, I changed the name. Under lantern light, I forgot who I was, so I could become